Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Mythgard Academy. This is session number 18 on the Name of the Rose. And tonight we will follow Adso into several unexpected difficulties in the course of his rather one-sided romance. Well, it's one-sided now. It was briefly two-sided, but it's been a lonely contemplation. Though I suppose in his defense, it's only been like less than 24 hours for him. But in any case, before we do that, just a quick reminder. This weekend, in only a couple days, is SoCal Moot in Carlsbad, California. So looking forward to getting back out to the San Diego area and seeing several of you, getting to see you, Jocelyn, and Jackie also. It's going to be great fun. And in a few weeks later, I keep forgetting the day, the 4th, I believe it is, maybe the 5th of April, whichever is the Saturday. The first Saturday of April is going to be Tex Moot down in Houston. And then we are back to Europe, to Belgium for Willow Moot on the 26th. So yeah, it's all coming around the corner. And then our final spring moot is going to be on the 31st of May, the very end of May, last Saturday in May, for Mountain Moot out in Denver again. And then Myth Moot from the 19th through the 22nd of June in Leesburg, Virginia. As always, really, really excited for that. Okay. Well, let's get back into the text here. So you will remember that Adso and Brother William were exploring the library for Brother William's second time, Adso's third, because you'll remember he rebelliously went to the library all by himself in the middle of the night previously, right before he had his memorable encounter in the kitchen thereafter. While he's there, this time, of course, you'll remember one of the great challenges, both advantages and challenges of this return to the library is that Brother William now has his spectacles, which means that a great deal of promiscuous browsing of the shelves is happening. And Brother William is, in fact, taking the pleasure that he had been hoping for, that he had been asking for, that he had assumed he would be able to do, which is to browse through the truly remarkable library. Keep in mind, we've been told several times, and this is very important, that the library of this abbey is one of the greatest and most renowned libraries in Christendom. An enormous repository of texts, not only of the fathers and of medieval scholars, and not only of the ancient days, right? It is not only a great repository for what in the Middle Ages they would have called the ancients and the moderns, namely the Romans and the medievals, respectively. But of course, it also contains a very large repository of the works of the infidels, that is, the works of the Muslims primarily. So lots and lots of things going on in this library, and Brother William now has not one, but 2 pairs of spectacles and is going around looking at everything that he can. So you also remember that they had worked out the probable layout of the library based upon their first visit and their observation of the outside of the building. And so they have a pretty clear idea of the map to places. So after now like 2 visits, they're now pretty confident that they can find the things that they need to find by and large. Jocelyn, we don't call them Saracens. Oh, we do. We do. Saracens is one of the things we call them. Infidels, sometimes heathens, sometimes. Yeah, there are all kinds of things that we tend to call them. It kind of depends where we are at the time. But I believe infidels has been the most frequent here because the differentiation is primarily about when they're called Saracens, for instance, the Muslims, I mean, in the Middle Ages, when they're called Saracens, they're being thought of primarily as like a foreign nation, and usually distinctions among the nations within them are not made in the medieval in the medieval countries. They're kind of grouped together, and so collectively, sort of nationally or sort of ethnically, they're called Saracens. Here within the Abbey, they're not thinking about them as enemies on the battlefield. They're not thinking of them as, like a political factor. They're thinking of them primarily as non-Christians, right? Because the issue, the way that they have kept coming up, is that they have written all of these texts, all of these books of learning, and the question is whether, to what extent, these works are dangerous or inappropriate for people to read because the fact that they were written by infidels. So, anyway, Moors. This is very rough. Moors is later. Like Shakespeare talks about Moors. You don't hear, like, for instance, in the Song of Roland, I don't think they call them Moors there. And it's also more of a Spanish thing. But again, as I say, more of a kind of a later thing as well. Anyway, okay. The Moors are Spanish in North Africa and later. Yeah, exactly. All right. Anyway. Here's another word, Jocelyn. Paynim, which is fun. It's a Middle English word, paynim, Paynim, which basically means pagan, sort of. The word pagan, the word heathen, very generic, very, it just means people who aren't Christians, essentially. And, a Paynim knight. You may remember that word from Sir Thomas Malory. When you hear them talking about Paynims or pagans, you certainly should not be thinking in terms of that which nowadays goes by that descriptor. Anyway, okay. Fencing Frog says, and the guys in the Song of Roland were really Basque Christians anyway. I mean, Saracens, it's, they were not very specific about this kind of thing. That was not their intention or their interest, essentially. Yeah, exactly. There are people who are not French. That's what mattered. They were not Franks. So there we go. And Eric, that's exactly right. Infidel makes more sense in this book because it's more specifically about belief. That's what within the Abbey they care about, right? Remember Alenardo's perspective, the guy who has been in this Abbey, who has not left the walls of this Abbey for like 75 years, probably. The guy's like 90 and has been in this Abbey since he was a novice. And to him, the Abbey is the world. Remember that the whole, this catastrophe, this series of catastrophes happening in the Abbey isn't just parallel to or like the end of the world. It is a picture of the end of the world. It's like these things happening within the scale of his world, which is to him the whole world, right? So yes, within the world of the Abbey, what matters is the life of ideas and the life within books. And the differentiation is it's not about nationalities or politics. it's about belief. Though nationality, that is geography, roughly, is in fact the one of the primary organizational principles of the library, which is kind of interesting, right? Though even there you'll notice like the infidels are all lumped in together, right? So even that is, and of course you'll also recall the like Roman grammarian who gets lumped in with the British because grammar is associated with those crazy British people, as William very proudly points out. But yes, it absolutely would be realistic for a medieval monastery, monks staying there for decades and not ever leaving. An oath of stability was an oath generally taken by monks. If you see a monk outside the abbey, any monk outside any abbey, there's only two reasons. There's only two possible explanations for that. One is if he is a monk with a role that permits or indeed obligates him to leave, like somebody who is appointed from the monastery in order to go to like check in on the lands that are owned by the monastery, right? To kind of do the rounds there. That's the case, for instance, of the monk in the Canterbury Tales pilgrimage. He's one of those kinds of monks who he is, to you in Chaucer's word, he is an outrider, an outrider who goes and kind of patrols around. The other reason you would find a monk wandering around is if he's up to no good and breaking his vows. And I will not say that that never happened, but it isn't supposed to. Oaths of stability are part of what it means to be a nun or a monk. And the number one thing that differentiates monks from friars. Friars are itinerant by their nature. That is their oath. So all the friars minor, all these Franciscans, all these pro-poverty people, they're all friars, including Brother William. He's a friar, not a monk. And so it's okay for him to be sort of wandering around. Adso is going to end up in Melk, in the monastery at Melk, and he is going to spend the rest of his life at Melk and never leave it. So yeah, that's totally normal. But anyway, okay. All right. So let's get back to the text. So Adso, they're in the library, and we've come to the we've completed the investigatory portion of the library, which all they accomplish tonight in the library is basically two things, right? One is the comprehension of the layout of the library and the basic mapping out of its fundamentally geographical matrix, right? The other thing that they discover is they find the Finis Africae, what is alluded to by Venantius. And so as far as they can see, the Finis Africae, this is the place where whatever it is in the library that people are finding, whatever Berengar knew about and swapped the information of its existence with Adelmo in exchange for sexual favors, and which Venantius learned also from Adelmo. Where did Venantius learn it? Do we even know where Venantius learned it? I don't know. But he learned about it and wrote about it in his cipher, remember. Whatever it is in the library, something in the library that is at the heart of all of these deaths. And it's in the Finis Africae, the ends of Africa. And they found it, but they didn't find it. Now, Gerald, would the Finis also be a reference to the Straits of Gibraltar? Yes, I think it would. most that, or honestly, almost any way you slice the ends of Africa, it means the edge of the world, right? Africa, Straits of Gibraltar, the, generally accepted western edge of the known world. At least it was in Roman times, and they're still using many of the same maps in the Middle Ages. So Africa is involved there, right? Or if you think about Africa in the other direction, south. I mean, it's funny. Sometimes people will make fun of the medievals because in their maps, they were like, okay, it isn't that the land ends, but they believed in what they called the torrid zone. That is, that there was a super hot central zone of the world that was uninhabitable. And they believed that there were things on the other side of it. Remember, they know the world is round. So they knew that on the bottom side of the world, on the other side of the torrid zone, there would be habitable land, just like there was in the north. And there was a lot of this is the Antipodes. The Antipodes, meaning your feet are opposite, like you're standing on your head, like in the southern hemisphere, because they knew about that. That's why they're called the Antipodes. So they knew that there were people they knew that there was a portion of the world in the south where people from our perspective were standing on their heads, or at least rather were reversed from our perspective. But you can't get there from here. Fancy Frog, that's exactly right. They believed that the whole central part of the world was a torrid zone that was totally impassable. And if you remember that the reason they thought that was the Sahara Desert, right? The Africa was what was south, right? Africa was what was south to them. And there is a rather torrid zone that none of them succeeded in crossing there. So yeah, that's the more or less sensible reason for that belief. Because of course they had not discovered, they knew nothing about Australia or South America, other than, as they say, vaguely guessing that such lands may well exist down in the Antipodes, and possibly there are people down there. And needless to say, because they liked imagining this sort of thing, they often imagined that the Antipodes were in fact full of really like bizarre people and creatures, people with their heads below their shoulders, like sticking out of their chests, and all sorts of things. Yes, there were a few expeditions into Sub-Sahara by the Roman Empire, but that didn't really carry over, especially since, remember, Marco Polo and the Spice Road, the Silk Road, their exploratory journeys were tending to go east, because there was a motive for that, right? There was profit to be had in going east. But anyway, yeah, okay. Meanwhile. Oh, sorry. Last thing. Finis Africae. So you'll remember there's still some mystery that they haven't figured out. There's a missing room. One of the towers has a room in it that they can't get. There's no door to the central chamber. And so they're like, is it a secret room? And there's something in Venantius's directions that they don't understand, which might be a hint of, is it a hint of how to get into the secret room or whatever? So William thinks there's something hinky going on at the Finis Africae, but they don't get to the bottom of it. Anyway, after they finish that, they have some free reading time. And in their free reading time, Adso discovers a section, a shelf of literature on love, which interests him particularly. And he begins to sort of diagnose his own condition, right? And he learns various things. Remember, there are several times when he is quite shocked to discover that his own experiences, the things that he's been feeling all day, are just, described in such perfectly accurate detail in these books. And then he starts reading some sketchier things. I learned further from some words of Saint Hildegard that the melancholy humor I had felt during the day, which I attributed to a sweet feeling of pain at the girl's absence, was perilously close to the feeling experienced by one who strays from the harmonious and perfect state man experiences in paradise, and this negra et amara melancholy, black and loving melancholy, is produced by the breath of the serpent and the influence of the devil. An idea shared also by infidels of equal wisdom, for my eyes fell on the lines attributed to Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Zakaria ar-Razi, who in Liber Continens identifies amorous melancholy with lycanthropy, which drives its victim to behave like a wolf. First, the lovers seem changed in external appearance. Their eyesight weakens. Their eyes become hollow and without tears. Their tongue slowly dries up and pustules appear on it. The whole body is parched and they suffer constant thirst. At this point, they spend the day lying face down, and on the face and the tibias, marks like dog bites appear. And finally, the victims roam through the cemeteries at night. It's bad. It's bad, right? There's this whole progression of what that he is sort of going through here. First, by reading these things where he's like, oh, kindred spirits, right? Like many other people have experienced this. Like I'm quite normal, right? And then he starts reading these much grimmer things. Now, one of the kind of jokes here is, again, thinking as Umberto Eco has kind of trained us to think through his many, many different contemplations of these things about signs and things. Do you see the play that's going on here? This is not just... Okay, on the one hand, this is a description, right? These are meant to be descriptions of cases. So these words are signs pointing to the things which are presumably the cases that these people have observed. But think about these signs from Adso's perspective, right? Having already, at first cheerfully, connected these descriptions with his own case, right? Yes, it's clear, it's official. I am definitely in love. I've read these descriptions of what it's like to be in love, and that's exactly what I have experienced, right? Anyway, they you see how Adso is responding to this, right? At first, he read descriptions of how people reacted, and he was like, these words describing these other people describe me as well, right? So these signs point to me. And then he reads this stuff. Right? The lycanthropy stuff cracks me up. Right? I mean, I think we've all had that experience, right? Where you're crossed in love, and the next thing you know, you've got like spontaneous dog bites appearing on your tibias, and like next thing you know, you're roaming through the cemeteries at night. Right? I mean, like it's a it's a classic case, right? But again, think of Adso's perspective on this. Having accepted initially that his case was being described by these, now he knows that he has not in fact experienced this. Notice the transition, the teaching of Saint Hildegard on this, that love is in fact a melancholy produced by the breath of the serpent and the influence of the devil. Uh-oh. Is this, and remember, he's been wrestling with this thing that I'm feeling. It's bad, right? Or is it good? Remember the whole, like, seeing her in the book of nature, which is like seeing God, and he's kind of seeing God through her, or is he seeing her instead of God? Like the way in which, remember our uncomfortable triad, right? Of religious experience, death, and sex, all kind of sharing the same signs pointing to them, leading Adso to not be sure how to differentiate, and his own recognition of that sort of overlap, right? So he already has, so this plays into his doubts and uncertainties about that. The lycanthropy thing, right? Now, he knows he's not in fact done this. Oh, wait. I just realized when he comes out of the library tonight, where's he going to be? Where's he been every time he has emerged from the library in the middle of the night? The cemetery. It gets to the refectory eventually, but remember, he goes through that underground ossuary and then ends up in the cemetery, the outdoor cemetery. Yeah. So in fact, for each of the last 3 nights, in fact, Adso has been roaming through the cemeteries. Fortunately, he hasn't seemed to make that connection, or else I think he'd be in a panic at this point, right? That's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortably close to the truth. But anyway, the point is, he now comes to things which he knows that most of these signs don't describe his situation, right? He's not yet experienced tongue pustules, no dog bites on his tibias, presumably yet, right? But he's nervous. He's nervous now because now these are signs which seem to him, at least potentially, to point to his own future, right? These are signs which point not to things that are, but to things that shall be. And remember, there's been some of that going on, right? With like Alenardo and his predictions, for instance. So maybe Abu Bakr Muhammad is in fact knows what he's talking about, and Adso is on the one-way path to becoming a lycanthropic monster, to werewolfhood. He chooses, he's not going to go here, right? He's distancing himself from this love thing, right? Werewolfitude. Yeah, I can take that. Maureen says, like a hypochondriac reading a medical journal. Yes. Arthur says, welcome to 90% of my workday. Right, Arthur. It's like somebody who's looked up their symptoms on WebMD and is convinced, that they have something horrible, probably cancer. Yes, they consulted Dr. Google and now know exactly what the future holds in store for them. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yep. Yeah. But notice the one thing I wanted to draw attention to here. Notice how Adso's reaction to reading this. His experience with love when he was thinking it through, we were looking at those passages fairly carefully from earlier in that morning. When he's thinking about his love, he is he doesn't dismiss it. He comes to he kind of makes his peace with it. He's okay not seeing the girl again. And he's sort of turning it into a positive contemplation, which is bringing him closer to God. Right? He sort of processed it and can sort of live with it now. His reaction to this stuff is not, oh, these books are wrong. He doesn't read St. Hildegard and say, no, my experience is not at all. I think she's wrong that it's produced by the breath of the serpent and the influence of the devil. He doesn't say that. Nor even with the infidel writer. He does not just, close that book and say, lycanthropy? You must be ridiculous. That's crazy. Right? Right. Calvin, that's exactly right. Books are never wrong, just like Google is never wrong. Exactly. I read it on the internet, so it must be true, right? But this is much more deeply ingrained. Remember what we've seen again and again, what William keeps emphasizing, how the lives and the entire perspectives on the world of these monks in particular are not just shaped, are dominated by, are determined by books. They use the books to process their experience because it's the books in which they live, in which they gain experience. Okay, let's keep going. There is an estimative virtue situated in the dorsal part of the median ventricle of the encephalus. What is that, I wondered? Whose purpose is to perceive the insensitive intentions perceived by the senses, and when desire for the object perceived by the senses becomes too strong. Remember, this is all in the context. Fortunately, and the books also teach him how to get rid of love, right? So he's eagerly researching how to get rid of love. There is an estimative virtue situated in the dorsal part of the median ventricle of the encephalus. The encephalus is, of course, the brain, but he's never heard of it, whose purpose is to perceive the insensitive intentions perceived by the senses. And when desire for the object perceived by the senses becomes too strong, the estimative faculty is upset, and it feeds only on the phantom of the beloved person. Then there is an inflammation of the whole soul and body, as sadness alternates with joy, because heat, in which moments of despair descends into the deepest parts of the body and chills the skin, in moments of joy rises to the surface, inflaming the face. The treatment suggested by Arnold consisted in trying to lose the assurance and the hope of reaching the beloved object so that the thought would go away. There's a lot of medieval psychology and physiology encoded in this paragraph. I'm not going to do a commentary word by word here. There is an estimative virtue. So a virtue means a power, right? The ability to do something is a virtue. And an estimative virtue, that is a power to contemplate things, right? So you have a power of contemplation, of imagination, whose purpose is to perceive the insensitive intentions perceived by the senses, right? So you take what you perceive by the senses, and then you think about insensitive things. This is the imagination he's describing, right? And when desire for the object perceived by the senses becomes too strong, The estimative faculty is upset. So when your desire for something that you have perceived, right? Whatever it be, like, for instance, as it may be the object of romantic love, right? If your desire for that object perceived by the senses becomes too strong, then your imagination is going to run wild, right? It is upset. And it feeds only on the phantom of the beloved person. Phantom meaning that imaginary image. Not the real thing that you're perceiving with your senses, but the thing that you conjure up in your imagination. This is a very fancy way of saying you will obsessively contemplate the person that you love, or whatever the object of your unwholesome desire is. As, for instance, perhaps it might be a ring, right? That you recently lost in a poetic altercation, right, with a visitor to your caves. You might perhaps form a phantom of the beloved object, and at that point your estimative faculty will become upset and feed only upon that phantom, right? Okay. And then inflammation occurs. Inflammation of the soul and body. You can tell by the disorders of the body, right? The heats that rise and fall, that, sometimes the heat will sink in with melancholy. Melancholy is a cold. Your humors are chilled, right? In melancholy. The heat descends inward and your skin is chilled. Or in moments of joy, the heat rushes to the surface and you blush, or you get flushed in the face. So how do you fix this problem? Trying to lose the assurance and the hope of reaching the beloved object so that the thought would go away. Give it up and move on. Right? Give it up and move on. Why, in that case, I am cured, or nearly cured, I said to myself, because I have little or no hope of seeing the object of my thoughts again. And if I saw it, no hope of gaining it. And if I gained it, none of possessing it again. And if I possessed it, of keeping it near me, because of both my monkish state and the duties imposed on me by my family station. I am saved, I said to myself, and I closed the book and collected myself just as William entered the room. Okay, so he's got it figured out, right? He's got no problems at all, because he knows that he has no hope. Don't you love that progression, though? I have no hope of seeing the object of my thoughts again. Or, if I did see her, I could never, gain the object of my thoughts again. Like, maybe I'd see her from afar, but I'd never be able to be with her again. But if I gained it, I would never be able to possess again. Like, we wouldn't be able to, be together. Or even if we did, meet in the kitchen and have a second encounter, it would just be another one-off, right? It would I'd never be able to keep her with me or anything. So therefore I'm saved, right? Therefore I'm cured. In fact, there's no problem. Fencing Frog says he's saying there's a chance. Yes. His his progression here suggests that perhaps there's just an outside chance that his thoughts are not in fact wholly free from feeding upon the phantom of the beloved person. Right. Yeah. So I clearly cannot choose the wine in front of me, says Eric. Yes. Eric says this is only the same guy who only just realized that logic can be manipulated. Yeah. Yes, it is. But he seems to be a quick learner as far as that goes. Right? Yeah. Fortunately, he has nothing to worry about. And so they leave. And what's the first thing that happens? He sees the girl again. Right. Wouldn't you know it, the object of his desire appears in his sight almost instantly, in the company of Salvatore, Remember what Salvatore's up to. He explained about this, that spell he was going to do. A woman in this holy place, and with a monk, Bernard said sternly, addressing the abbot. Bernard, you'll remember, is the visiting inquisitor, who is the leader of the Pope's faction, who has come to argue against William and Ubertino and the rest of the Franciscans. Most magnificent lord, he continued, if it involved only a violation of the vow of chastity, this man's punishment would be a matter for your jurisdiction. But since we are not yet sure that the traffickings of these two wretches hasn't something to do with the well-being of all the guests, we must first cast light on this mystery. Now, you rogue there. And from Salvatore's bosom, he seized the obvious bundle the poor man was trying to hide. What's this you have here? Now, keep in mind the really rather horrible but delicious irony of this whole situation. Bernard is an inquisitor, and we know how he thinks. We have lots of reasons. We've seen how people who do not think like William think, right? How other inquisitors think that William has differentiated himself from, all the way from that first conversation that he was having with the abbot way back when they first arrived. And you will remember that in that conversation, and in time since then, we have seen that top-down analysis, right? I know spiritually what is going on, right? I know the big picture, and therefore I just have to figure out how this fits into that, how the events that I'm seeing fit into that big picture. And when you are an inquisitor who is 100% convinced that the devil is very pervasively at work among people in order to tempt and damn the souls of the faithful, you know that's what's happening, right? Like you don't need evidence. You begin by knowing this, right? And so therefore it only stands to figure out how the things that you see happening or the testimony that you receive fits into that picture, which you already know to be true. And so as soon as he says, since we are not yet sure that the traffickings of these two wretches hasn't something to do with the well-being of all the guests, we must first cast light on this mystery. You can feel it coming, right? Oh man, he's finding Salvatore, a monk, and this peasant girl from the village. He's going to think the worst. But what's the worst? The worst is not that they were sneaking off for doubly inappropriate clandestine sex in the abbey. That would be bad, as he points out. But as soon as Bernard is brought in, he's not going to be satisfied with that. That he's likely to find a reason to accuse them of being agents of the devil among them, right? Yes, trafficking, as in with the devil. The traffickings of these two wretches. Now, Fencing Frog, it is possible he means they're traffic with each other, right? Like, why have they met? It is possible they have met only for unchaste purposes, right? That would be bad. But it is possible that their traffic one with another is of a different kind, right? And possibly also, Fencing Frog, as you imply, that the two of them together may be trafficking with the devil, which would be really, really bad. And yes, Tomas, it is indeed ironic that Salvatore's name means savior. Yes, it does. So again, we are prepared. He's going to be like, Bernard is going to be like, oh, they're worshiping Satan, right? What is in the bundle that Salvatore has? I already knew. A knife, a black cat, which, once the bundle was unwrapped, fled with a furious yowl, and 2 eggs now broken and slimy, which to everyone else looked like blood, or yellow bile, or some such foul substance. Salvatore was about to enter the kitchen, kill the cat, cut out its eyes, and who knows what promises he had used to induce the girl to follow him. I soon learned what promises. The archers searched the girl with sly laughter and lascivious words, and they found on her a little dead rooster, still to be plucked. Ill luck would have it that, in the night, when all cats are grey, the cock seemed black, like the cat. Yeah. He's carrying a knife, a black cat, and some mysterious slimy substance. And the girl is carrying what looks to be a black cock, a black rooster. That looks bad. I mean, Bernard wouldn't have need 1% of that much evidence against them. Right? I mean, he entered in convinced that they were likely to be up to some kind of witchcraft, right? And he finds him concealing a living, alive black cat and a knife. And she has a black rooster. Yeah, so yeah, Calvin, the archers are not monks. They're guards. They're just like guards that are sent with Bernard. So yeah, they are totally secular soldiers. Yes. Anyway, the irony, of course, is that, well, like the first irony, the first sort of tragic stroke here is that Bernard, who was all prepared to assume the worst, has found evidence that would convince somebody far less ready to assume the worst than Bernard that the worst was in fact true. A black cat and a black rooster and a knife. And now it's worse. Do you remember? Why is Salvatore carrying a black cat and a knife? Yes, Fencing Frog, exactly. Salvatore actually was planning to traffic with the devil. He told Adso earlier in the night, I am going to cast this very powerful spell. Remember, he's going to kill the cat and he was going to pluck out its eyes with the knife and he's going to put the eyes in the eggs somehow, still don't know how. And he was going to try to get the girl to spit on them. And then he was going to bury them in horse dung. He's already got the horse dung, though they haven't discovered that apparently. Yeah, he looks guilty because he is guilty. Right, then the eggs were going to hatch and and a devil was going to come out. And then the devil was going to give him what he wanted, which was to make him irresistible to women. So the irony is that Bernard, who has his mind made up to condemn them, is in fact quite correct as far as Salvatore himself is concerned. And now the girl, Adso, believes to be innocent, right? She's been paid with a rooster. Now that the rooster is dead, still to be plucked. And Adso believes that he knows why the girl has an apparently black rooster. She's going to take it home and eat it, right? Yeah. Yeah, Jocelyn, I agree that Salvatore making himself irresistible to women in an all-male institution, that's what he's going to spend he's going to sell his soul for that, basically. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So notice the girl. Is she a witch? Is she trafficking with devils? Do we know? Adso absolutely believes she is innocent. Right? You can see it immediately. Ill luck. A little dead rooster still to be plucked. He knows exactly how to interpret that sign. The sign that is her holding a dead rooster. Right? She's holding a dead rooster. There's only one purpose for it. She's going to eat it. Or, take it home and feed it to her family. So unlucky that she's caught. And to make it doubly unlucky, it looks like a black rooster. Is it a black rooster? We're not even told exactly. Again, he's saying that it's ill luck that it looks black. But it's not really a black rooster, though. Right? It seemed black. But that was probably just because of the light. Right? And she's just a hungry peasant girl trying to do right by her family. Keep in mind, I'm not questioning. That may well be true. But do you see that it's not a joke? Because it's not a funny situation. But do you see the issue? Why is Adso so immediately convinced of her innocence? Because he wants to believe that she's innocent. He doesn't know. His interpretation is completely plausible. But then again, Bernard's interpretation of Salvatore is exactly right. Calvin says he believes in his interpretation because he knows the answer. Because he believes he knows the answer. Yes, Jocelyn, he's still dewy-eyed about the sex. He's in love with this girl. He'd just been thinking about how he's, what was the verb? Feeding his estimative virtue upon the phantom of her. Right? Remember his contemplations of the morning. She was all that was good in the world. Everything that was beautiful made him think of her. And she was essentially tied to the goodness and beauty of creation and of God himself. That being the case, she's obviously not a witch. Right? Yeah, he's in love, so she must be innocent. Again, I'm not saying that Adso's wrong. I'm not trying to imply that she's definitely a witch, and he's wrong. He may well be right. What I am trying to point out is that Bernard's perspective on this and Adso's perspective on this function precisely the same way. Both of them are prejudging the case because they believe they know the answer. Jackie says, I don't want her to be a witch. I don't want her to be a witch either. I'm also going to hope that Adso is correct. Yeah. But they're proceeding. He and Bernard are proceeding on exactly the same process from different ends, right? The beliefs that they bring to the situation are quite different. But this is where the damnable facts of Salvatore's intentions are so interesting, right? Because Bernard is not wrong in his case. If you it's it's a more complicated situation than it seems. And all of this recent contemplation of love has helped, if we're carefully aware of it, has helped to prepare us for this moment, right? To see what's going on with Adso there. She may be guilty merely by association. Adso certainly believes it. And again, what I'm interested in here, looking at this situation, is less what is the situation really, and more, do we see how those two things are parallel? This, I think, is also instructive. I think that Umberto Eco is very right to point this out. It's easy to look at someone like Bernard, someone who believes the worst, someone who is not only ready, but in many ways eager to put a very dark interpretation on almost anything that happens. And to wield that, to use that as an instrument for his own power over others, right? I mean, we're all of us have our guard up as far as Bernard is concerned, right? This is an inquisitor, for crying out loud. We all know just how to feel about this. And so we look at his approach, the way that he's condemning things without even knowing the evidence, and we're just like, oh, that's horrible. That's horrible. It's horrible to think that way. You shouldn't do that. But then what Eco is doing is saying, when we see somebody do exactly the same thing in the other way, it doesn't make us as uncomfortable. But note that it's exactly the same procedure, right? What Adso is not doing, he's not just presuming innocence until she's proven guilty. He's insisting on innocence. And his insistence on her innocence is not only biasing his interpretation of events in her favor, it is potentially influencing his observations themselves. I'm less than 100% convinced that rooster isn't black. It might be just a dark red rooster, which looks black at night. Maybe. But I think it's also possible. Remember the chain of rationalizations he just went through? Isn't it possible that if he comes into this situation knowing for a fact that she's innocent, that he might look at that rooster and say, well, it's not actually a black rooster. It's not like a totally black rooster, right? It's not nearly as bad a sign as it looks like. Because what are the facts of the matter? The two of them have been discovered, sneaking around. He has a black cat. She has a black rooster. Both of these things are animals that are associated with satanic rituals. He, in fact, was going to use the black cat in a satanic ritual. What was she going to do with her black rooster? If we try to be perfectly objective, it is only bias that leads us to think, oh no, it's impossible. She can't be a witch. Right? Again, I'm not saying she's definitely guilty. I'm not saying I believe her to be a witch. But I think that the juxtaposition of Bernard's leaping to conclusions and Adso's leaping to conclusions is very important here. Yeah. I think William agrees with Adso too. I look, it's very much more likely that she's not a witch than that she is. That is my point. But do you see the point? Bernard and William start sparring again. And William cannot offer himself as a witness. Refuses to engage with... Bernard tries to set him up, right? Bernard tries to set William up and be like, so, oh, former inquisitor, how would you interpret this, right? How would you read this, being caught with a black cat in the middle of the night business? And he's like, I can't give witness to this. Oh no, there are far more authoritative witnesses, Bernard smiled. Stephen of Bourbon, in his treatise on the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit, tells how Saint Dominic, after preaching at Fongeau against the heretics, announced to certain women that they would see the master they had served till then, and suddenly into their midst sprang a frightful cat the size of a large dog, with huge blazing eyes, a bloody tongue that came to its navel, a short tail straight in the air, so that however the animal turned it displayed the evil of its behind, more fetid than any other, as is proper for that anus which many devotees of Satan, not least the Knights Templar, have always been accustomed to kiss in the course of their meetings. And after moving about the women for an hour, the cat sprang on the bell rope and climbed up it, leaving its stinking waste behind. Right. And that proves that Salvatore was going to commit witchcraft. Right? Yeah, so everybody knows, at least everybody who's in the political party of Bernard knows that the Knights Templar are satanic cat ass kissers. Yes, that's basically it. Yeah, according to the King of France, says Fencing Frog. Yeah, exactly. Yes, as JJ says, you can't ask for more solid testimony than that. Exactly. And you see, so notice again the genre of witness, of authoritative witness that he appeals to here. This story, retold in this treatise by Stephen of Bourbon, a distinguished scholar of great auctoritas. It tells this story of a black cat, a satanic black cat, which, revealed itself in response to the injunction of the saint. And so this very, Arthur, I agree, very Tevildo-like cat appears, which is actually a manifestation of the devil. And that proves that Salvatore must be guilty. Do you see why? Again, think about the kind of evidence that this is. This proves that black cats are definitely involved in satanic rituals. Since Bernard, already knew that traffic with the devil is likely what was going on here. He now sees a black cat. It's been proved. It's been proved. Remember so again, this is illustrative of the difference between what the inquisitor considers evidence and what William considers evidence. Then Ubertino comes over and makes it worse. William, you will recall, Adso is trying to convince William to intervene. She's innocent. Tell them that you know that she's innocent. And William says, it doesn't matter. She's dead already. She is but burned flesh, he says. There is no saving her. Adso. Remember Adso's touching belief not only in logic but in truth? If only the true facts of the matter, about her undoubted innocence, could be revealed, it would certainly be okay. William knows it's not going to matter. As soon as she was caught, she was condemned in the mind of Bernard. He didn't need a black rooster or a black cat. But getting them, there is nothing in the world that is going to convince Bernard that witchcraft was not going on. William knows this. And he tells Adso to forget about it, to give up hope. This is not a question of truth. Then Ubertino comes over. You are looking at the witch, are you not? He asked me. And I knew he could not know of my story, and therefore he was saying this only because he had caught, with his terrible penetration of human passions, the intensity of my gaze. No, I defended myself. I am not looking at her, or rather, perhaps I am looking at her, but she isn't a witch. We don't know. Perhaps she is innocent. And you look at her because she is beautiful. She is beautiful, is she not? He asked me with extraordinary warmth, pressing my arm. If you look at her because she is beautiful, and you are upset by her, but I know you are upset because the sin of which she is suspected makes her all the more fascinating to you. If you look at her and feel desire, that alone makes her a witch. Okay. Ubertino works the same way. He knows she's guilty. Why does Ubertino know she's guilty? Yes, Calvin, every woman that's desirable is a witch. You can prove it. It's easy to tell. Because if she's beautiful, then she will excite sinful desire in men who look at her. And that proves she's a witch, because she's causing men to sin. Right? That alone makes her a witch. Ubertino has been leaning hard. He is operating under the same understanding, right? The same approach, rather. We get in Ubertino's words, a third example of the same thing. A third example of the same thing, that is that top-down interpretation. You know what is true, And knowing what is true, you fit what you see into what you know to be true. You should be careful there, JJ. JJ is quoting a very slightly amended version of a verse from the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew. You have heard that it is said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already looked upon a witch. Yeah, the actual verse ends, looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Where in fact, Jesus is emphasizing the sin of the man doing the looking rather than of the woman who is being looked upon. Anyway, no, you didn't claim that it was the verse, JJ. I just wanted to clarify. Anyway, so yeah, he knows what's what. In this case, just as Bernard knows, he knows all about the insidious and horrible wiles of the devil and how the devil will move wretches under his control to do wicked things to try to ensnare the righteous. Bernard knows all about this, right? And so knows just how to interpret. Would know just how to interpret it even if they didn't have the dead giveaway of a black cat and a black rooster. With it, it should be perfectly obvious to anyone, such that he can taunt William about it, right? Daring William to offer a different interpretation or to contest him in his interpretation of things here. And William knows with confirmation like that, with evidence as easy to fit into his initial premise as that, it is hopeless. For Ubertino, his is not a knowledge of the wiles of the devil, though he might say that it was. His is one merely of misogyny, right? Believing that women are thoroughly wicked. We've heard Ubertino talk this way, right? Now you'll remember, Adso asked a very good question of Ubertino in their long conversation. When Ubertino got off onto one of his favorite tangents about how horrible women universally are, right? Yes, now, Calvin, you were right that the Virgin Mary is the exception. But he spoke of her, she doesn't count as a woman, right? But Adso says, well, but what about, you had female friends? St. Clair, and, like there were these sainted women that you're all about, right? You're a huge supporter of these sainted women. What about them? And Ubertino's like, doesn't count. They are saints because they are exceptions, but there are almost no exceptions. They were exceptions, but there are no other exceptions, right? He knows she's clearly a witch on account of being female. Yeah. So this, of course, among other things, spotlights William's approach again. Notice William is the only one who does not approach things this way. Ubertino has his set of beliefs and interprets everything through them. Bernard has his beliefs. Adso has his beliefs and interprets everything through there. He's only being as diffident as he is to Ubertino here. We don't know. Perhaps she is innocent. Because he is being deferential to Ubertino. Like he's not wanting to, he's kind of hedging, right? Because he doesn't want to put himself out there and be in Ubertino's face. So he doesn't say like, no, how dare you call her a witch? She's obviously innocent. Yeah. So Jocelyn, the Black Rooster is clearly a gift from Salvatore. At least this is what Adso says, right? We know that Salvatore is in the habit of giving her presents of food that will not be missed. In last night, it was a heart, like a cow's heart. Yeah, Mighty Felix points out he also doesn't want to be accused along with her. Yes, that is true. And anyway, again, it's easy to, one can see how the facts can be very easily made to fit into Adso's belief, his trust in her innocence, right? Given that what Salvatore is trying to get her to do, namely participate in his demonic ritual, is like unusually strange and shady, he had to give her an unusually good gift. So instead of just giving her a piece of offal, a piece of entrails, like the cow heart that he gave to her before, he's going to give her an entire chicken, which is more valuable. So yes, makes perfect sense why she should be carrying a dead black chicken. Unless she's a witch, in which case it also makes sense why she would be carrying a dead black chicken. Exactly. She could use them for magic rituals. Calvin, think about that. Remember Adso. Remember his reaction to seeing what was that was wrapped in the cloth that she left behind her in the kitchen after their brief amorous encounter. He was appalled. Some hideous, monstrous, bloody thing, right? What would she be using a gigantic bloody heart for? Now, William has the theory. Stew, probably. Right? And it's a perfectly plausible theory. But again, Adso, knowing what he knows, could make a stronger case for her witchery than even Bernard could. Right? Again, not arguing that she's actually a witch, right? But it does look bad. It really does. And she's probably not a witch. But if she were a witch, she may well be acting exactly like this. Yeah. But Adso won't hear it, can't think it, because he knows that she is good and beautiful, just like all of the good and beautiful parts of nature that he could see that morning. I also wonder, I don't know, Tomas, do you have the Italian version? Echo's original Italian? No? Okay. Somebody did. I thought it was you. It's okay. I'm also curious what Italian word he uses here. Does he call her a strega? What's Lostrega is the word that he calls her? Okay. So a witch. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Tu guardi la strega, vero? Is what Ubertino says. You're looking at the witch. Are you not? Yes. You're looking at the witch, true? See, I like that better. Vero. Vero plays on Adso's contemplation of truth, right? It's funnier that Ubertino brings up truth casually, right, in passing, as a figure of speech. Yeah, he is verily looking at the witch. I mean, no, he's not looking at the witch because she's totally not a witch. Don't worry, Jackie. I also am convinced of her innocence. I really am. But anyway, this is such a, I just love the like infinite creativity of Umberto Eco's contrivances in this story. All of these situations that he calls up, not content with giving us an example of this top-down reasoning by an inquisitor. He does so in this scene in which, thinking back to what Adso was saying, like how can we be sure? How can we tell the difference? How can we know where truth lies? It's fascinating. And the juxtaposition between Adso and Bernard, genius. Just genius. All right. I have to end a little bit early tonight, so we'll stop there. I didn't get very much further. Where did I put my book? Oh, dear. I misplaced my book. All right. Yeah. So for next week, let me see. Hang on. Let's go to, yeah, we're in day 5. Said we were in day 6 last time. I didn't mean it. We're in day 5. Let's read through Nons. Nons is the long chapter. So yeah, let's read through Nons. Stop at Vespers. That, or at least I do not aspire. I do not believe I shall get beyond Nons, is perhaps more accurately how to put it. So, all right, that's what we'll plan for next time. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you around soon, including those of you whom I will see this weekend at SoCal Mood. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye now.